All right, let's dive into something super interesting today, this idea of realistic happiness. Not just those fleeting moments of joy, but a deeper, more lasting sense of well-being.
Yeah, that's the stuff that matters.
And what if I told you that the journey to that kind of happiness might start with your brain?
Oh, this is right up my alley.
Today, we're going deep into a conversation between Dr. Daniel Amen. He's a psychiatrist who's known for his work in brain health.
I've heard of him.
Yeah, and he was on the On Purpose podcast with Jay Shetty.
Cool. What did they talk about?
Oh, so much good stuff.
Yeah.
Get ready for some fascinating insights about how our brains really work.
Okay, I'm all ears.
So it's fascinating how we tend to separate mental and physical well-being.
Yeah, like they're two totally different things.
But Dr. Amen actually challenges that idea. He's done some amazing research.
What kind of research?
Well, get this. He's scanned over 200,000 brains.
Whoa, that's a lot of brains.
Right. And what's so remarkable is he's found a clear link between a healthy brain and a healthy mind.
So it's not just about meditation or positive thinking. It's about the physical state of our brains.
Exactly. It's like the foundation for feeling good.
Makes sense.
And this isn't just a theory. He's scanned brains from all walks of life, even convicts.
Oh, wow.
And the evidence keeps coming back to that same idea. If the brain is struggling, the mind will too.
Okay, so how do we actually get this healthy brain that seems so important?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. Dr. Amen says that even our everyday habits can either help or hurt our brain health.
Interesting. Like what?
He talks about dripping versus dumping dopamine, which is that feel-good chemical in our brains.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Explain that.
So when we do things like getting sunlight, exercising, or even just holding hands with someone we love,
Aw, sweet.
our brains get this slow and steady release of dopamine.
Ah, so we're kind of nourishing our brains over time.
Yes, exactly. But then there's the dump. Think about junk food or too much alcohol or even things like touring.
Okay, those definitely feel good in the moment.
They give us a huge rush of dopamine all at once. But then we crash and we just crave more.
Yeah, I've definitely been there. It's like a vicious cycle.
Exactly. It's a cycle that doesn't lead to lasting happiness.
No, it doesn't. It creates more dependence, not satisfaction.
Hmm.
So how do we shift from dumping to dripping?
Dr. Amen has some really cool strategies for that. One that I thought was super clever is what he calls Chloe's game, named after his daughter.
Cute. How do you play?
So the idea is before you do anything, big or small, you just pause and ask yourself, is this good for my brain or is this bad for my brain?
Huh. That's a great way to bring more awareness to our choices.
I know, right?
Right.
It's so simple.
Yeah.
And he also talks about starting the day with an affirmation like, today is going to be a great day.
I like that.
And at the end of the day, reflecting on what went well today.
So we're training our brains to focus on the positive.
Yes, it's all about being intentional with our thoughts. But is this just about blindly being positive all the time?
That's a good question.
That's where Dr. Amen brings in this really important difference between positive thinking and what he calls accurate thinking.
Okay, what's the difference?
It's not about ignoring reality and just slapping a smiley face on everything. It's about facing things honestly, but making choices that align with our well-being.
Got it. So being real with ourselves, but making good choices.
Exactly. He even said that people who are like, don't worry, be happy all the time, might actually have shorter lifespans
Wait, really? Why?
because they might be ignoring actual health risks. It seems counterintuitive, but it shows how important it is to be honest with ourselves.
That's pretty wild.
Right. So we've got habits as one piece of the puzzle, but Dr. Amen also talks about something that makes total sense. Targeted nutrition for brain health.
Oh, so what we eat affects our brains.
Big time. Our brains need specific nutrients to function at their best, just like any other organ in our bodies.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And there's some fascinating research around certain nutrients and how they impact our brain function.
Like what?
Well, he talks a lot about omega-3 fatty acids. They're crucial for mood, focus, and even skin health.
Omega-3s, right. I've heard those are good for you.
They are. But what about some of the less common nutrients? What does he say about those?
Well, he highlights theanine, which is found in green tea. It's known for calming anxiety and helping you focus.
Oh, I love green tea.
And what's really interesting is it actually works really well with caffeine.
Oh, So that's why I feel so good after a cup of green tea.
Maybe. Green tea has some caffeine naturally, but the theanine helps smooth out the jittery effects so you get calm focus instead of anxious energy.
That's really cool. What else is there?
Well, then there's saffron. It's a spice, and honestly, from what I've read, it's almost like a miracle spice.
Saffron, huh? Tell me more.
Saffron's been shown to really help with mood, memory, and even libido.
Wow, that's impressive.
It's being studied as a potential treatment for depression, and some studies even suggest it could be as effective as Prozac, but without the side effects.
No way. That's incredible. I'm definitely going to look into adding some saffron to my diet.
I think I will too. Now, for our listeners who might have experienced trauma, Dr. Amen is a huge advocate for a type of therapy called EMDR. It stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Have you heard of it?
I have, but I don't know a lot about it. Can you explain how it works?
It's really interesting stuff.
Uh-huh.
It involves recalling traumatic memories, but here's the twist. You do it while you're also doing something called bilateral stimulation.
Bilateral stimulation, what's that?
It's things like eye movements or tapping, back and forth. It seems kind of weird, but somehow this process helps the brain actually reprocess the trauma.
So it's not just talking about it, there's this physical element too.
Yeah, and it helps reduce the emotional charge associated with those memories. It's like rewiring the brain's response to them.
That sounds so promising. Does Dr. Amen actually talk about it from personal experience?
He does. He used EMDR himself to deal with his anxiety, and he said it was incredibly helpful.
Wow, so he's not just recommending it, he's actually tried it.
Exactly. And he's also seen amazing results with police officers who've experienced trauma on the job.
Oh, that makes sense. That would be a really tough job.
A lot of them were able to go back to work and live healthier, happier lives after going through EMDR.
It's incredible how resilient the brain can be.
Yeah, it really is. Speaking of support, Dr. Amen also talks about how when it comes to happiness, it's not one size fits all.
Right, what works for one person might not work for another.
Totally. And that's where his idea of brain types comes in.
Brain types.
Yeah, he's identified 5 main types, and each one has its own strengths, weaknesses, and needs.
Oh, that's fascinating. So it's like a personality type for your brain.
Kind of. And understanding your brain type can give you so much insight into what really makes you, well, you.
I love that. So could you give us an example of a couple of these brain types and how they're different?
Sure. So could you give us an example of a couple of these brain types and how they're different?
Sure. So you've got the spontaneous brain type. Those are the people who thrive on novelty and surprises,
They're always up for an adventure. Exactly. Routine is like their worst nightmare. They crave new experiences all the time.
Got it. So what's another type?
Okay, well, on the flip side, you got the persistent brain type. These folks are all about routine and predictability.
They like to know what to expect.
Yep. Any unexpected changes can really throw them off and stress them out.
Interesting. So if you know your brain type, it can help you make choices that actually support your needs and make you happy.
Exactly. Like, let's say you're a spontaneous brain type.
Yeah.
You might get a lot of energy from trying a new restaurant every week, right?
I can see that. But for a persistent type, that would be too much.
Totally. For them, sticking to their favorite spot would bring more comfort and joy.
So it's all about understanding what works for you.
And it goes beyond activities, too. Dr. Emmons says even nutrition should be tailored to your brain type.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, he found that some brain types actually need more carbs to feel good.
Wait, so those low-carb diets that are so trendy might not be the best for everyone?
It might sound crazy, but yeah, for some people it's true. He says that folks with a persistent brain type, for example, might actually get depressed and irritable on a ketogenic diet.
That's wild. I never would have guessed that.
It's because they need those carbs to help their brains make serotonin.
Which is that mood-regulating neurotransmitter.
Exactly. So, just because something is popular doesn't mean it's right for you. We really need to understand our own needs and make choices based on our own brain type.
It's all about that personalized approach.
Exactly. Figure out what your brain needs and then give it the right fuel and environment to thrive.
I love that. So speaking of thriving, Dr. Amen makes this really interesting point. He argues that happiness is a moral obligation.
A moral obligation. That's an interesting way to put it.
Right. I've never heard anyone say that before. What do you think he means by that?
Well, his point is that whether we're happy or not actually affects everyone around us.
Oh, that makes sense. Our mood definitely rubs off on other people.
Exactly. If we're always unhappy, it affects our relationships, our parenting, how we do at work. It just creates this ripple effect outwards.
But when we're genuinely happy,
We show up as better partners, parents, friends, colleagues. We're just better humans overall, and we contribute more positively to the world.
So it's not just about us, it's about the impact we have on others.
Exactly. It's about finding that place where our actions line up with our values and help make the world a better place.
I like that. So this kind of ties into what Dr. Amen calls the lies of happiness, right? The things we're told will make us happy, but actually don't.
Yeah, like fame or having tons of stuff, or even that idea of everything in moderation.
Oh, the everything in moderation myth. That's a good one. What does he say about that?
He says it's often just an excuse to indulge in unhealthy habits.
Oh, I see what he means.
Like, sure, a little piece of cake every now and then isn't a big deal. But when moderation turns into eating sugary treats every day, that can really mess with your brain and body.
So it's about being honest with ourselves about what moderation actually means.
Right, it has to be in the context of our overall well-being.
So what are some of the other lies he talks about?
Yeah, he also gets into the effects of marijuana.
Well, that's interesting, especially since it's becoming legal in more places.
Yeah, and while a lot of people see it as harmless, Dr. Amen brings up some important concerns about how it affects our brains, especially young brains that are still developing.
That's crucial, especially with so many teenagers using marijuana these days.
He talks about studies that show that regular marijuana use, especially when you're young, can actually make it harder to think clearly, you know?
Oh, wow. So it impacts cognitive function.
Yeah, and it also increases the risk of mental health problems like anxiety and depression, and it could even contribute to developing psychosis in some people.
Those are serious consequences.
Yeah.
It sounds like we need to have more open conversations about the potential downsides of marijuana.
Absolutely. It's not about demonizing it, but about being informed and making responsible choices.
So what's the main takeaway for our listeners on this topic?
Dr. Amen isn't saying that everyone who uses marijuana will have these negative effects, but he's encouraging us to be aware of the potential risks and to find healthier ways to manage stress or anxiety or whatever might be leading people to use it.
So it's about addressing the root cause, not just masking the symptoms.
Exactly. And he points out that a lot of these healthier approaches, like doing some deep breathing exercises or meditating, can actually help you feel better really quickly without any of those negative side effects.
It's amazing how many tools we have at our disposal.
Right. We don't have to rely on substances to feel better.
So besides those relaxation techniques, are there any other things we could do to manage our mental health?
He also talks about the power of simple cognitive techniques, like challenging those negative thoughts. He calls it killing the ants.
Killing the ants.
Yeah, like those automatic negative thoughts that just pop into your head and take over.
Oh, I do that all the time. Sometimes I find myself spiraling into negativity and I have to stop and ask myself, is this even true?
He says it's helpful to actually write the thought down and then ask yourself, is it true? And then write down the opposite of that thought and ask, is that true?
That's a good idea. It helps to see it in black and white.
It's a way to break those negative thought patterns and get a more balanced perspective.
It's about taking back control of our minds.
Exactly. And in the end, it all comes back to that idea that happiness is a choice. We have to make choices every day that support our brain health and help us build positive habits.
It's a journey, not a destination, right?
Totally. It's a constant process of learning and growing and making choices that support our well-being. It really is a journey, and it's so worth it, you know, not just for us, but for everyone around us.
For sure. So we've covered a ton of ground here. We talked about how important brain health is, the power of tiny habits, targeted nutrition, even therapies like EMDR. But how do we actually take all this and use it in our everyday lives?
Right. It's one thing to talk about it, but how do we actually do it?
Exactly. Well, I think one of the biggest takeaways is that happiness isn't this magical destination we arrive at, you know?
Yeah, it's not like checking off a box.
It's more like a daily practice, a choice we make again and again to do things that support our brain health and well-being.
So instead of chasing after some abstract idea of happiness, maybe we should be asking ourselves, what's one small thing I can do today to support my brain?
I love that. It's so much more manageable than trying to overhaul your whole life.
Right. Could it be as simple as getting outside for 15 minutes of sunshine?
Or playing Chloe's game before you make a decision.
Maybe sprinkle some saffron on your dinner tonight.
Ooh, I like that one. Or even just taking a few minutes to do some deep breathing when you're feeling stressed. It's those little things that can make a big difference over time.
Exactly. It's all about progress, not perfection. You don't have to do everything at once.
Just start small and build from there.
And as you start incorporating these things into your life, think about this. Dr. Amen talks about how our happiness can actually ripple out and affect other people.
Oh, yeah. It's like that whole pay it forward idea.
Exactly. So what if taking care of our own brains and choosing happiness is actually our way of making the world a better place?
That's a beautiful thought. Just imagine the impact we could all have if we focused on nurturing our brains and choosing happiness, not just for ourselves, but for everyone around us.
Right. It's a pretty amazing possibility.
So as you go about your day to day, think about this. What's
Yeah.
one small, brain-healthy act of kindness you can do for yourself and for the world?